Hello everyone, welcome to the last spotlight in July 2026. Now, this is a very big time. This month was the biggest month for the possibility of disclosure, and it looks like it's not going to happen in terms of anybody announcing anything. Everything was set up fine, but remember there are good ETs and bad ETs. Now, the good ETs want the full disclosure absolutely totally right now. They're the ones that we work with. But then the bad ETs want actually the opposite. And so the bad ETs are ferociously pushing to confuse the population, one chaotic thing after the next, wars all over the place, and wars are spilling out of control. So we had a major press conference in Washington, D.C. a month and a half ago. We had the release of Steven Spielberg's movie, Disclosure Day, which has been a worldwide blockbuster. And we had releases from the Department of War, otherwise known as the Defense Department, for almost every week, showing new videos and new pictures of extraterrestrial spacecraft, which they called UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. And it seemed to be building up. At the same time, you get the chaotic stuff going on in the Middle East and Europe, and it looks like World War III is on the way. And that's something that we have forecasted for a very long time. A number of people are actually going through our old deep news stuff, and what I mean by old is like 2025. 2025 actually started in 2024, then 2025, and now 2026. And they're looking at our old deep news stuff and seeing that our forecasts for 2025 and 2026 have been absolutely spot on. So if you have not been following us, you're looking at the wrong things, because we told you exactly what was going to happen, especially into 2026, and that is exactly what is happening now. You get the discombobulation of the entire ecosystem. Governments collapsing, basically going into World War III, and it's going to expand as far as our stuff is concerned. And so those of you who have been following us, especially on FARSIGHT'Prime.com, you're following it, and you're getting it. And those of you who are not, you're getting the news from the wrong places, because you're not getting what's really happening. But anyway, violence of the war type have not yet happened inside the domestic United States. And we are expecting that to happen. Enemies of the United States know that the United States will keep on doing whatever it wants to do as long as nothing ever happens domestically. So they know that. So they're going to be doing something eventually. And we have forecasted what that will be, what that will look like. But anyway, so that's something you want to keep in touch with. We have a couple other things that we want to mention on the news before I get into the main topic today. Intisam has a remote viewing live stream instruction class next Friday. So we'll be sending out the email for that pretty soon. And we'll be sending one out for sure on Thursday to tell people the exact date and time for it. So if you've not yet signed up for our free email newsletter that you can find on our website, farsight.org, you need to do that. But Intisam she's really big in instructional stuff. She's actually come out with a game, a remote viewing game that people are buying, and it's really great. So I want to show you that. It's a really fun thing. So Intisam has published, she actually created and published this game, Third Eye Quest, and it has cards in it, and it's really well done. It's very high quality. The manufacturing of it is absolutely perfect. And I'm going to be showing you this game, actually the physical box of the game and the cards and so on as the weeks go on. But those of you who want, really, you get a tremendous amount of experience remote viewing, getting those low-level gestalts. It has cards in it. You hold the card and you play games with other people. So you have two people, one looking at the card, one not, and you're trying to perceive what's actually on the card, whether it's a bird, whether it's a mountain, things like that. And it's got zillions of cards in it, and it's a really great game, exceptionally well designed. So for those of you who want probing practice, that game is like ready to go, ready to rock. And again, she has a live stream this Friday, and we'll be sending out a an email about the live stream on Friday. No, on Thursday in advance, a day to let you know. I think it's going to be in the early evening, like 6 or 7 o'clock Eastern U.S. time. Anyway, so this is a really great game for you to get and to play. And she's done this all on her own, so Farsight does not get any financial cut for it. It's just a really great thing, but it's our stuff in terms of intellectual stuff, and that you really get something for it. So anyway, I really recommend that. Well, someone said we need disclosure, not games. It's true we need disclosure, but the games help you perceive things that you're not being told by the mainstream. So that's part of disclosure. Okay, so anyway, that is this is really great. So what we're going to be doing now is talking about the main topic today, which is near-death experiences and the aliens connection. So last week I talked about near-death experiences and the death traps, and that was a really intense and really crucial talk, because I was able to explain what the people who have done research on near-death experiences have shown, and to show how close that is. It's exactly parallel to what we have discovered under totally blind, scientifically clean conditions of the death traps. Now, the big difference here, and the big sort of take-home from that, is that the near-death experience researchers, people like Dolores Cannon, Raymond Moody, and people like that, what they often perceive, what they often get in the thousands of people that they've worked with, and we covered some other researchers as well last week, a bunch of them. But what they perceive is lost souls, which is after people die, they pop out of the body and they see the light and they're drawn to the light like a magnet, and then they go in and then they have the classic experiences. The one thing that they don't report in the near-death experiences is the electroshock treatment that happens. But what they do explain is that the people involved in near-death experiences or hypnotic regressions on things like that is a lot of people who are just stunned, like wandering, lost souls. And that perfectly aligns with what we have discovered with regard to the death traps, which is after you get sucked into the light, you're hit with an extremely high voltage shock, and that stuns you. And apparently the death traps is not like a smooth, well-oiled machine. It just leaves a lot of the people wandering around, and eventually over time they're collected and new memories are put in and they get recycled back into the earth with a new life and so on. So it's a messy thing. It's not designed to be a comfortable thing or a good thing. It's designed to recycle people back into the earth experience. And that's a really great parallel that you can see. What we show is people get stunned, and then with the near-death experience researchers, using different types of methodologies, they report souls all over the place that are simply lost and stunned. They don't remember who they are. They have no memories. They're stunned. And that's exactly what we're talking about. So there's a huge parallel between our research on the death traps and those people who do near-death experience type of research using different methodologies. So that's important. Now, we're also giving advice on the after-death experience. So a lot of people say, well, we just want to know how to stop it, how to get out of it. Well, one of the things we can tell you is after the death experience, just don't go towards the light. Go somewhere else. The light is simply technology, and it's designed to suck people in, and then they get shocked. And then if everything worked sort of according to the clock, they would get filled in with new memories, and part of those new memories would be some person coming out, undoubtedly an AI, referring to the Council of Elders over there that thinks you're really important, but we think you should go back and work on a few wrinkles in your personality. And having no memory and no telepathic or remote viewing capabilities anymore because of the shock, you say, sure, it sounds good to me, and you get recycled back, and you come back to Earth, and here we are. So it's a really important thing for you to know before the death experience. And those people who are following us on farsightprime.com get an in-depth understanding of the complexity of the extraterrestrial phenomenon and the complexity of the entire sort of non-physical realm as well. And that complexity you really need to understand before you kick the bucket, okay, in our opinion, okay? But today's talk is an extension of what we talked about last week. So here we're not talking about near-death experiences and the Farsight remote viewing stuff. Now we're making the connection between the near-death experiences and extraterrestrials. So there are people who have studied near-death experiences and extraterrestrials. And as you know, in Farsight, we have done a huge amount of research on the extraterrestrials. Okay? So how do we connect the near-death experience researchers with what we study with regard to remote viewing and with what we study with regard to the extraterrestrials? Okay? Now, unfortunately, the disclosure thing doesn't look like it's going to happen this month, but that's going to be one of the huge missed opportunities in the history of humanity. But nonetheless, it's going to happen at some point, and it's going to happen in the not too distant future. It has to. And when that does, everybody is going to be asking about the whole connection for the whole thing. The near-death experiences, the death traps, the extraterrestrials, the aliens. They're going to want to know about everything. So this is one component of that immense body of knowledge that people are going to want to know about. So let's go through some of the near-death experience researchers and ask what they found about the extraterrestrials. Now remember, last time we were not talking about the extraterrestrials. We were just talking about near-death experiences and what we have seen with regard to the death traps. So now we're interested in specifically what these same researchers have said with respect to the extraterrestrials. It's a different question. Okay, so it deserves its own talk. So let's go back through some of those same researchers and say what they said about the extraterrestrials. So let's begin with Dolores Cannon. A lot of people email us in and say, well, what about Dolores Cannon? So what about Dolores Cannon? What did Dolores Cannon have to say about aliens, about the extraterrestrials? Fascinating stuff. So Dolores Cannon's perspective on extraterrestrials represents a significant pillar of her later career. And it was documented extensively in books like The Custodians, Beyond Abduction. Now that came out in 1998. And The 3 Waves of Volunteers in the New Earth. And that came out in 2011. So unlike the terrifying narratives popularized by horror movies or mainstream alien abduction accounts, Cannon's regression data paints a starkly different and largely benevolent picture of the ET presence on Earth. For example, in The Custodians and the Seeding of Earth, through her deep trance quantum healing hypnosis technique, or QHHT, Cannon claimed to bypass the conscious mind to speak directly with the entities involved in UFO encounters. So, the gardeners of the universe. Cannon's subjects consistently described advanced extraterrestrials not as invaders, but as custodians or watchers who originally seeded life on Earth. And they view Earth as a massive, precious cosmic garden, and humans as their evolutionary descendants. Now, in the concept of evolutionary guardians, according to her books, these entities have been subtly manipulating human genetics for millennia. And Cannon concluded that what the mainstream calls alien abductions are actually routine medical checkups meant to upgrade the human DNA, protect the species from diseases, and prepare humanity for the next stage of evolutionary consciousness. Now, she also said what the Greys are. She said what the Greys actually are, as one of the That's one of Canon's most famous assertions concerning the classical gray alien archetype with slanted eyes, small bodies, hairless, things like that. Well, she said they were biological androids. According to her sessions, the small grays are not actual living entities from a distant planet. Instead, they are highly advanced biological robots or drones created by higher dimensional beings. Now, the reason for their form, because the higher dimensional ETs exist as pure energy and cannot easily survive in the dense physical atmosphere of Earth, they engineered the Greys to act as physical suits or physical avatars to execute tasks on the physical plane. And they are completely logical, they lack human emotion, and they function primarily as data collectors. Now, in the third major arc of Canon's work, The Three Waves of Volunteers, Canon's 2011 research shifted heavily toward the concept of star seeds. And those are souls from other planets or dimensions who chose to incarnate into human bodies. Now, following the dropping of the atomic bomb in 1945, extraterrestrial watchers realized that humanity was on a path to planetary self-destruction. And because of a cosmic prime directive of non-interference, they could not invade or explicitly intervene from the outside. Instead, a call went out across the cosmos for volunteers to intervene from the inside by being born as human babies. And Canon categorized these extraterrestrial souls into three distinct waves. Now, the first wave, she said, was born in the late 1940s and 60s, and they were pioneers. And those souls came directly from other planets or dimensions and had the hardest time adjusting to Earth. They frequently felt completely out of place. They suffered from severe depression or alienation, and absolutely they hated the human violence. Now, the second wave, born in the 1970s to the 1980s, that was the frequency holders. And these souls had an easier psychological transition, but they preferred absolute solitude. Now, Canon noted that their job was simply to generate a specific high vibrational energetic signature to peacefully anchor light into the planet just by existing. And finally, the third wave, they were born in the 1990s and onward. Those are the indigo and crystal children. Now, these are younger souls born with advanced pre-altered DNA who do not need to struggle to remember their mission. They naturally possess high intuition and are hardwired to tear down and rebuild outdated, corrupt human institutions. And finally, we get the amnesia wipe. The amnesia wipe. Crucially, Canon noted that when these advanced extraterrestrial souls agree to volunteer for Earth duty, they must submit to the universal law of Earth incarnation, which is a total memory wipe. And upon entering the human womb, they forget their home planets, their advanced technology, and their specific assignments. And the primary goal of Canon's hypnotic work with these individuals was to peel back this induced amnesia, allowing the volunteer to realize why they felt so alienated on Earth and to consciously step into their role as planetary helpers. Okay, so our research here at Farsight sees the same type of thing, but we interpret it totally differently. So before I go into our interpretation, let's go and review sort of another NDE or near-death experience researcher and find what that person said about the extraterrestrials, such as Raymond Moody. Okay, so let's pivot from Dolores Cannon to Raymond Moody. How did he also talk about the extraterrestrials or aliens? Well, it's a little different. While Raymond Moody himself did not focus heavily on extraterrestrials in his core research, several other prominent pioneering near-death experience researchers noticed such a massive overlap between near-death experiences and alien encounters that they dedicated that they dedicated entire studies to the connection. So let's start, though, with Raymond Moody. And we can call that the mythological and multidimensional view. So Dr. Raymond Moody's work remained primarily focused on the clinical, psychological, and historical aspects of the NDEs, or near-death experiences, and grief facilitation, such as his work with psychomantiums. Now, he did not explicitly write books on UFOs or alien abductions. However, in his broader lectures and discussions regarding the nature of consciousness, Moody frequently noted that the beings of light encountered during the NDEs are often interpreted by their experiencer based on their cultural background. So, a religious person might perceive the being as Jesus or Buddha or an angel. A non-religious, scientifically minded person in the modern era might perceive these same entities as highly advanced multidimensional extraterrestrial or non-human intelligences. So Moody's work established that the scenery of the transition is highly subjective and projected, meaning that the aliens and the angels are often different cultural terms for the exact same non-physical entities. Now let's pivot to another researcher, Kenneth Ring. And we'll talk about the Omega Project, which came out in 1992. Kenneth Ring, now the most prominent NDE, near-death experience researcher, to tackle the alien connection directly was Dr. Kenneth Ring. And he was a co-founder of the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And he was also a very close colleague of Moody. So for years, Ring actively avoided the UFO topic. However, after reading accounts of alien abductions, he was stunned by the massive psychological and physiological overlaps between the NDEers, or the non-death experiencers, and UFO experiencers. And he launched a systematic comparative study known as the Omega Project. Now, Ring's key findings are these. The encounter-prone personality. Start with that. Ring found that both NDEers, near-death experiencers, and alien abductees, they share a highly developed capacity for psychological absorption. They are naturally sensitive to alternate realities and alternate states of consciousness. And then we have the identical after effects. So following their encounters, both NDEers and UFO abductees undergo identical radical personality shifts. They report a dramatic decrease in the fear of death, an increased concern for the ecology of the planet, heightened psychic and telepathic sensitivities, and a feeling of being vibrationally altered. Well, then let's go to the evolutionary step. Ring concluded that both NDEers and near-death experiences and UFO encounters are not random hallucinations, but rather a coordinated systematic or systemic trigger designed to rapidly evolve human consciousness, moving the subjects towards what he termed a new stage in the evolution of the human mind. Yep. Now, there's one more researcher that's really great that I want to talk about, and that's P.M.H. Atwater. He talks about aliens and the near-death experience. So, he's a heavyweight. And the NDE research that Atwater compiled was based on decades of data, including cases from the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, to map out where the NDEs and the alien contact collide. So Atwater documented numerous case studies where individuals actually experienced both phenomena simultaneously. So we'll call this the shared realm. In many cases, people who clinically died on Earth woke up not in a traditional heaven, but aboard non-physical structures or vessels interacting with non-human intelligences who comforted them or gave them information before they were sent back to their physical bodies. Now, the message for this is both the NDEers, the near-death experiencers, and the ET contactees, they frequently report receiving identical downloads of information regarding the illusion of time, the nature of reality as a grand simulation, and warnings about humanity's destructive use of technology. So, the summary of the research has a consensus. In the broader field of near-death studies, researchers who look at the alien phenomenon generally agree on one core thesis. The boundary lines between the afterlife and outer space are incredibly blurry. Whether a soul is exiting a physical body via a clinical death or experiencing an out-of-body abduction event, they seem to enter the exact same non-physical, multi-dimensional territory, one populated by highly advanced telepathic and often technologically oriented non-human entities. So, P.M.H. Atwater has written extensively on this subject, but his most direct and definitive work on this specific intersection is his book, Aliens and the Near-Death Experience, that was published just a month and a half ago, May 2026. Okay, so that was Aliens and the Near-Death Experience, fresh off the presses. Now, in this groundbreaking book, he explicitly bridges decades of near-death experience scholarship with UFO and alien contact phenomena, utilizing both personal experiences and external testimonies. So there are some key features of this book. 38 coinciding case studies. Atwater analyzes 38 detailed interviews with individuals who have experienced both near-death experiences and direct alien contact, and highlights massive structural overlaps in these accounts, such as interactions with beings of light, deep telepathic communication, and journeys to highly complex otherworldly environments. So if we were to have a synthesis of these early pioneers and builds upon the findings of legendary figures who mapped the intersection of consciousness and contact, including Dr. Kenneth Ring, remember the Omega Project, and Dr. John Mack, the Harvard psychiatrist who studied abductions, Leo Sprinkle, Greta Woodrue, and Whitley Strieber. And in Atwater's own past life ET identity, in a fascinating parallel to hypnotic regression studies, Atwater shares details about his own 3 near-death experiences from the 1970s. Under deep hypnosis, he discovered that he had a past life as a space-traveling extraterrestrial entity named Arrakis, from an ET civilization in the Sirius star system. And the book actually includes transcribed trance recordings of Arrakis. So, other related works by Atwater is While Aliens and the Near-Death Experience, that's the main book on the UFO-alien connection. He authored several other foundational texts on advanced consciousness evolution, including the Big Book of Near-Death Experiences, and that's a massive comprehensive guide to the near-death experiences. Future Memory, and that's exploring how NDEs alter our relationship with time and precognition. And Children of the Fifth World and Beyond, the Indigo Children. Children of the Fifth World and Beyond, the Indigo Children. And that is detailing the emergence of highly intuitive, altered DNA children who seem to possess inherent cosmic or off-world connections, similar to Dolores Cannon's 3 waves of volunteers. Okay. So that sort of ends my sort of summary of what other people have been talking about with regard to the extraterrestrial contacts and near-death experiences. So last week I talked about near-death experiences and the similarities between what we have perceived at Farsight called the death traps. And this week I've summarized what people have been talking about with regard to near-death experiences and the aliens, extraterrestrials. So now, how does all of this map up with Farsight's view? So this is really, really, really important. From our perspective, and feel free to disagree, but from our perspective of doing all of the research that we have been doing for decades with the remote viewing experience, under totally blind conditions, corroborated with multiple remote viewers, this planet is a prison planet. It really is. It's not an analogy or a metaphor. It really is. And everything that happens to people when they are out of the body, such as near-death experience, is part of that prison planet processing. And one of the things that has really come across, and the stuff that we talked about today, is that people's perceptions of what happens after the near-death experience varies depending on their belief structure. And that fits entirely with what we already have explained with the death traps. What we see is that people die. Nobody really dies. You cannot kill an ISB, an immortal spiritual being, otherwise known as a soul or a spirit or whatever. But we call them ISBs, immortal spiritual beings. So people die and they pop out, and then they see the light. And that pretty much corresponds with all of the near-death experience research. And then they are drawn to the light. Again, that is very close connection to nearly all of the near-death experience research. And it's at that point where we differ, because the near-death experience researchers don't record anything about being shocked. But they do record stuff about souls being stunned and walking around aimlessly. So it's clearly that after they get into the light, something happens to them, and then they're stunned. So what we do is we tell you what happened to them. They got bolted. They got electrocuted. They got that shock. Okay. And then we have that people come out, and it's almost certainly always an AI comes out and talks to them about various things, such as the Council of Elders over there, making you feel like you're super important, that you deserve to be discussed by the Council of Elders, and so on. But the near-death experience people that we have been talking about today, the researchers we have been talking about today, often say that what happens in that meeting varies tremendously by your belief experiences. And that totally matches what we have with our research. People go into the death experience with certain belief structures. So the AI or whatever you have adapts. So if you have a Christian going through this after the shock experience, just to make everything blend in, the AI comes out and says, so I am an angel, or I am Jesus, or I am, comes in with a Christian type of background for it, and it sort of blends in with them, and then they fill them in with false memories and a mission to go back and fix their personalities, okay? But if the person turns out to be a secular, scientifically oriented person, you get a different type of encounter. And the AI adapts and says, it talks about multidimensional stuff and advancing to higher dimensions and things like that. So what happens is lies. What happens is after you get sucked into the light and zapped, you get lies. You get a story. And a lot of those stories overlap. There's a lot of Christian stories, a lot of secular stories, there's a lot of extraterrestrial type stories. And when the NDE researchers are researching that, they pick up that stuff. They pick up the overlap. They pick up where there are commonalities among those experiences. The trouble is that the NDE researchers assume that because multiple people are reporting the same thing, they're assuming that that's real, that actually happens. That's the big difference between Farsight's research and the NDE researchers. The stuff that the people report is not trustworthy. And they're not star seeds. And they're not in different waves. This is stuff they're just simply told. There is not a plan to gradually raise the vibrational level from the 4th level to the 4th dimension to the 5th dimension. There's nothing like that. It's a story that people are told because the entire process of the death traps is to keep everybody contained in this prison. It's a psychological prison, and you break out of the prison only by breaking the psychology, only by telling people what it's all about. That's why the disclosure process is so important. Now, look at it this way. Just hold on. I know some of you have your favorite researchers saying, no, this is exactly, you want to just believe what they have said. Believe me, those researchers do believe what they wrote about. It's just that at Farsight, we were saying they're getting their data from sources that are totally not credible. The people who actually go through the near-death experiences, those are processed individuals, and they're going to be feeding back stuff that's simply not reliable. Nothing of it is reliable. So let's say the disclosure process actually happened. So let's say the President of the United States got up and said, we're going to fess up and tell you that we have actually been in contact with extraterrestrials since at least the 1940s. We get crashed ships. We've had non-biologic people captured and so on like that. Let's say all that came out. The very next thing people would say is, oh, okay, well then what next? People would say, well, what have they been doing all this time? And then they'd say, how do they communicate? And then the answer would be they communicate telepathically. And then that they have a clear understanding, the extraterrestrials, of the ISB, or the non-physical being, who's the real person. And all these questions would actually come out, and they're not easily answerable. They're not something that a politician is going to want to just sort of talk about openly the way we talk about it openly here. And people would start asking the questions, and then the entire house of cards would collapse, and people would say, so this is a what? A prison? And you can't believe anything? Look, you can't believe anything that any major political leader in any country tells you. Look how the whole world is spinning apart with wars in Europe and the Middle East, and you're going to see major stuff happening here in the domestic United States. When you see all that stuff, obviously this place is just a mess. And you're going to ask, is the entire universe, is the entire galaxy just like this? And the answer is no, they're not like this. This is, if there's any planet that's the description of hell, this is it. Earth. It's hell on earth, because hell is earth. So what actually happens is people are going to ask those questions. And when they start asking the questions, the political leaders are not going to have good answers for any of these questions. And then people are going to be looking at all the NDE researchers and saying, well, what have you guys been finding out? And what they're going to find out is that they have been finding out exactly what people have been told once they die. Once they die, they're going to find out that all the stuff that Dolores Cannon, Raymond Moody, and the other researchers have reported actually are the things that were told to them in the death traps process and the recycling process. And then they're going to be saying, so like, what is religion? What is anything? Do you get the idea? Everything has to change. The entire worldview of everything is going to change when people do this. And the traditional politicians, they have one interest. They want to maintain control. That's it. They want to maintain control. That's all. They're not interested in freeing you. They're interested in controlling you, at least through the next election or the next decade or next whatever. But they're not interested in just unleashing chaos. They are interested in controlling you as elements of a market that needs to be marketed so that the funnel of cash can go from down below up into the elite, and that they can maintain and keep that control. So while you do see some strong parallels and commonalities among the near-death researchers, what you're really seeing is commonalities in the stories that the extraterrestrials and their AI helpers are telling these people in the death trap experience. That's what you're seeing. One of the most interesting things that actually is probably real is when people are having a hypnotic regression of getting out of the body and traveling around. See, the near-death experience is like sudden, and it's unplanned, and it's over in just, a few minutes. But with hypnotic regressions, which is some of the research I talked about last week, the people can hang out longer, like minutes, 30 minutes, perhaps maybe an hour. They can hang out in that process. So it's more like you're on a bus and you're traveling through that realm and you can notice things. And that's when you really see the lost souls coming through really clearly, because they have time to notice these things. When they report on these lost souls, the very first thing you should be saying is, what? What do you mean lost souls? What? Look, it's not that the death experience is so traumatic that they're stunned. That's not it. When you die, you pop out of the body, you're not immediately stunned. You're still yourself. The problem is, once you get sucked into the light, you get zapped. And that makes you stunned. And until the AI comes out and reprocesses you with new memories and new, Council of Elder stories or whatever, you're just wandering in a stunned state. And that's exactly what these researchers report. These lost souls are wandering around in a stunned state. So that's our take on the near-death experiences and the near-death experiences with the aliens connection. The aliens that you encounter are not benevolent. The aliens are not trying to elevate you up. That's part of the belief system that's instilled into you during the near-death experience if you're in that New Age type of philosophical point of view. Then they instill that, and when you come back, it's even a stronger spiritual connection to that concept because it's been reinforced with the memories that have been put into you during the near-death experience. And even if you died and didn't get zapped, but just came back, you died, it was a short visit, and you came back in, but you had that encounter, that encounter includes memories that you're bringing back, and that reinforces those early New Age ideas that you had, and you feel very strong about that. And so you feel a stronger spiritual connection to those ideas. That's how we view it. Okay? So the near-death experience where people actually, die, that's quick, that's short, and they see the light, they get almost into the light, but they get yanked back before they actually get zapped. The near-death experiences, which are done through hypnotic regression, they pop out and they hang around for a longer period of time, so they're the ones who have the opportunities to see the lost souls. But then they all have to have experiences that interpret what they've experienced. And that's where all the confusion happens. Their background is not erased. Again, the Farsight research says the following. This planet is a prison, period, full stop. And if it wasn't a prison, then with all the bad stuff that we've been talking about, then why hasn't the disclosure process happened a long time ago? And almost, it's way over 60%. It's like 70% plus people in the United States, for example, believe that the extraterrestrials are real. So once you believe that the extraterrestrials are real, then the next question is, what have they been doing? And then as soon as you ask that question, everything that we have reported at Farsight becomes possible. Everything. And the whole idea that the extraterrestrials are all benevolent. Friends, do you see any groups in the entire planet Earth that are just all benevolent? There are factions. Factions. and they fight. As above, so below. That's what's happening. So there is no wonderful galaxy of peaceful extraterrestrials welcoming you as soon as you lift your head out of the sand and acknowledge that the extraterrestrials exist. Warm and cozy brothers and sisters of the galaxy saying, finally you can rejoin us. No, there's nothing like that. There's chaos up there. There's chaos up there, and there's fighting. It's not as bad as it was in the past when they had basically a 1,000,000-year holocaust going on in this galaxy. This galaxy is a war-torn galaxy, but it is still a contested sovereignty galaxy. Okay, let me pivot a little bit and tell you what's coming. We have been intensively working this last few weeks on finishing up some of our sort of major video creation stuff that we're working with, stuff that will allow us to produce an enormous amount of content that's drawn from our own research. It's coming to an end. We were hoping that it could be finished up this week, but it's extending into this next week as well. But we're very close. And if you are following us on FarsightPrime.com, there's two things. First, you're really supporting us. If you're following us on our FarsightPrime.com, there's nobody else on this planet that's doing what we're doing. And you're helping a lot. We can't do this without you. Let me emphasize that again. We cannot do this without you. We are not a super rich organization. We need you to help us. So subscribing to FarsightPrime.com is something that you're doing to help yourself and the future of humanity. However, we do also want to say that you are helping the future of humanity directly by exposing yourself to the ideas that we're presenting, because you're not getting these ideas anywhere else. And somebody needs to be out there talking about these ideas when the disclosure moment really happens. So you're setting yourself up to be a teacher, an educator. And your role as a teacher, as an educator, is so important in the near future. So, when you're following us and watching our materials on FarsightPrime.com, you're helping a lot. Not just right here and now, but you're helping in the future by connecting yourself as a teacher, as an educator, to the billions of people that are going to be needing your help in the very near future. All right, everybody, that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. Let me check the time. It looks like I've talked for almost an hour. That was good. And we're going to be going into another topic, a different topic next week. And if all goes well, you'll be seeing some new spheres and some... actually, we're closing in on a brand new mysteries project as well. But you'll be seeing some new spheres and more of the visual novels that we have been coming out that highlight through dramatic visual novels the research that we have been coming out with on FarsightPrime.com. All right, love you, everybody, and I'm going to be seeing you next week. And stay close. All right, stay close and stay safe. These are very tumultuous times. All right, everybody, see you next week. Bye now.